Hi everyone, I am Kenzie with the MADTASTY team, and I'm so excited to have Whitney Lauritsen with us today for a MADTASTY session. And Whitney is a well-being coach that consults on healthy lifestyle practices that improve the quality of body, mind, and planet. I'm super excited about today and a little nervous about this session because we are actually going to be assessing my day-to-day routine and my kind of new normal, and Whitney's going to help me get to a better day-to-day. So everybody welcome Whitney. Hi, Whitney.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I am excited about this and I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. It is something I'm really passionate about. A lot of people have been struggling with anxiety, stress, feelings of fear and uncertainty. So whatever I can do to help with that and then just optimize life in general so you feel your best every day, that's really important to me. And I'm especially excited about this because I love MADTASTY so much. And it's a big part of my life. I'm a huge fan of CBD in general. I love sparkling water. So to fuse the two together is like a magical combination. You are going to fill out a little life audit. It's a questionnaire with some things that can really help you get clear on where you're at with your life and what you want to work on and get clear on your why behind all of those things. So I'm super excited about that. And for anybody who's watching this video and wants to do that too, we have that available for you. So there should be a link in the description field where you can download those questions and you can fill it out. So you have the questionnaire in front of you, right? If you want to start filling that out, each question in there is designed to help you reflect. And I really would love you to focus on the why behind each of those things as well, because when you're very aware of what your motivation is, it becomes easier to shift things and have a more positive relationship with those elements of your life.
So you finished the questionnaire, right?
Yes, I did.
I'm so glad. All right, so now that you've sent over your answers, Kenzie, let's talk about some things that you can do to shift and start to feel better. So I broke it down into the main goals that you have, and I've broken them down into like 5 different tips and techniques. So for you, Kenzie, and for anyone else watching, you'll be easily able to start to try some of these things right away. The number one thing, the first thing I want to start with is you said that you've been feeling like your schedule's been all over the place and you want to be more consistent. You haven't felt like you had a consistent schedule. And it sounds like the desire that you want to have there is to feel more structured and organized and also have more energy. Very first tip for you, Kenzie, and I think this is helpful for anybody, is to create a schedule and or a to-do list. You have to figure out what works best for you. I use apps on my phone and my computer that sync up, so my to-do list can be connected to my calendar. If that works for you, great. If not, you could write it down by hand, creating a schedule that's based on your priorities. So part of what you did through that little questionnaire and life audit was gaining more clarity about what you're currently doing and what you want to be doing, and those are basically your priorities. So you want to be time blocking based on those priorities and the elements that make up a good day for you. What are the priorities for you right now?
I think one of the top priorities are just some sort of physical movement every single day, because I tend to feel stuck, and just I think it increases my anxiety when I'm not doing that, as well as a meditation or something mindful that I can do, like listening to a helpful podcast, or that needs to be kind of higher on my priority list just because it gets my mental kind of in the right place as well.
Since that's important to you, is to block off time on your calendar for exercise. So literally put it on your calendar. And for me, I set a reminder and I work out at the exact same time every day. That has helped make it a habit. And then also a huge thing when it comes to your calendar, Kenzie, is to be clear on how it's fitting into the other things, the other necessities. So sleep is a big necessity, right? I know that you want to get that 8 hours of sleep. So you need to actually put that on your schedule too. And so with those two things on there, then you can start to structure the rest of your day. I also recommend time blocking when you're going to eat. So eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. A lot of us try to multitask our meals, but I encourage you to give yourself at least 15 minutes of focus on your food. So a lot of us just put things like our work schedule on our calendar or our social schedule or events or whatever. But if you are open to it, blocking out all of the other basic things, those priorities we've been talking about, will actually help you make sure that they happen. And so a huge theme here is about joy. So my second tip for you, Kenzie, and everybody else watching, is to do things that bring you joy every single day. Your calendar should not just be filled with appointments and work and sleep. And like, it's kind of like, maybe you like those things, but do they bring you joy? So I want to know from you, Kenzie, for the second tip, what is the biggest thing that brings you joy right now?
That's tough in these trying times. But I think actually all the kind of virtual hangouts, I get to see so many of my friends and family kind of that are all over the place, and we can all come together. And this is something that we really never did before all of this. So that's been really special.
Good. All right. Well, then your second action step for today is to add a time block for socializing on your calendar too. The other thing that can be helpful too is breaking things down into simpler steps. So something like working out makes sense in theory, but you have to kind of prep yourself for what that's going to be. So not just blocking the time out on your calendar, but what are you going to do in that time? Another struggle that you said that you have, Kenzie, is you feel like you've got information overload. That kind of brings up some anxiety and stress for you. Sometimes you feel like uncertainty and fear. And it sounds like a lot of that's coming from social media or like reading the news. Is that right?
That is correct. It's like information overload 24/7. I get notifications on my phone, and then I check my social media, and it's this happening, and it's just overwhelming. And mentally, I've had a hard time processing everything.
Well, thank you again for bringing that up, because I think this is one of the most common challenges that people have, is spending way too much time on their devices. And there's some research that says it's not really good for our long-term health, but we do it anyways because it's very mentally stimulating. If the very first thing we do in the morning is get on our phone and go on social media and read the news and maybe come across a stressful email or a text message, that puts us into this state of tension and stress right away in the morning. And the same thing is true for night too. We have trained ourselves to be on our phones. So just as you trained yourself into something, it's helpful to train yourself out. And that's why a morning and evening routine work really well. So those bookends in your day are so incredibly important. And if I were you, I would try to either completely minimize or challenge yourself to spend less time on your phone. Another thing that you can do is just put your phone out of reach. So you could still use it as your alarm clock, but put it on the other end of the room so you can't just like roll over at night and grab it in the morning or have it easily at your fingertips when you go to bed. You can turn off notifications. You can put your phone on Do Not Disturb. You can put it somewhere else so it's out of sight, out of mind. And then also build into your morning and evening routines other things that feel more joyful to you. And so that's kind of accomplishing two things. One is that you're creating a routine that's supporting you and bringing in more joy, and you're crowding out that information overload and spending a lot less time on your devices. All right, we've got a few more tips and a few more things to go over. You want to do a little bit more?
Yes.
All right. So another thing that you said that was tough for you was food. My third big tip for you is to think about what you're currently doing and what you currently have access to. So for you, Kenzie, when it comes to food, you're currently ordering online. That's easy, that's your resource, you're in that habit of it. So how can you start to order online things that make you feel good now and in the future? So you have that double benefit. One easy thing you can do is to continue going to the same restaurant that you like to order from, but just order something off their menu that's a little less processed. For tip number 3 is not just about food, it's also about creating healthier habits based on what you already have access to, right? That's the big theme of tip number 3. So when it comes to exercise, thinking about the things that you have loved to do before we went into this physical distance quarantine period. So going to think about, okay, well, I really loved going to this class and I loved this teacher, versus trying to like start from scratch with an exercise class that you've never done before. So again, if your schedule's thrown out of whack and you don't have the joyful things, of course you're gonna feel sad. Of course that anxiety and stress and all those things start to creep up. So if you can go back to the things that brought you joy and the things that were on your schedule in the past, those are already resources that you have. It's not easy to switch from eating one thing to another really quickly. You need to kind of, it comes back to that gap, right? Like, what are the small steps you can make in between two goals? So if that small step is just ordering something different on a menu, when it comes to exercise, it's hard to go from in-person to online. But if the in-between resource that you have access to is somebody that you're already used to taking their classes, it's like less of a resistance there. So if you just block off your time that you're gonna grocery shop, like put that on your schedule. And then when we talked about breaking things down, don't just put grocery shop in your schedule. Make sure you know what are you gonna buy when you go to the store. Actually, another thing that you could use, Kenzie, is if you like ordering out a certain dish at a restaurant, why don't you look up a recipe for that exact same dish and then just go buy the ingredients for it? And you're making it at home. And that reminds me, another thing for you, Kenzie, you said that you don't always like making food, cooking and food prep. If you can just find the joy in that, it'll be huge. So that's why tip number 2 is so important, is like find the joy in making yourself food. My 4th tip for you, Kenzie, is to set up some visual, auditory, and aroma cues for yourself. And this is actually really helpful for your brain in order to develop better habits. Cues are basically making it simpler and helping you get into a habit, because when you see something, when you hear something, when you smell something, it's triggering an association in your brain. So when it comes to exercise, when it comes to food, when it comes to whatever well-being change you want to make in your life, if you have a cue in front of you, it'll put you into that rhythm. So first, let's talk about it when it comes to exercise. So for you, you want to think about, well, what type of workout are you going to do, and what do you need to prepare for it? What's on that checklist? And then putting those things out so that you'll visually see them. So it might be weights, if you're going to do like a class with free weights. The other thing is putting out your yoga clothes or fitness clothes in general. I do yoga, so I always think about yoga, but putting out your fitness clothes on your bed or on a chair or somewhere where you're going to see them accomplishes 2 things. It reminds you that you're going to do your class, and it makes it easier. And the same thing can be true with food as well. So for you, Kenzie, once you write that shopping list, put it somewhere on the counter so that you see it every day. Or if you buy the ingredients for something, put those out on the counter to remind you to make them. So for you, Kenzie, what are some visual cues that you could put out for yourself to remind you to work out and to eat well?
I think I'm definitely gonna have, a grocery list that I'll put on the fridge that I can just look at, kind of every week. And then also my tennis shoes. If I put those out, and sometimes I'm dorky, I'll put my socks even in them, like ready to go.
I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, come on, get ready, go on a run, your shoes are already ready to go, So I think that'll be a huge cue for me.
Yes. And actually, MADTASTY is part of my visual cue for 2 reasons. One is that I have the hat, and I love this hat. It's like my favorite hat. I put this out next to my shoes. Like, I have my shoes lined up visually, and I put the hat on the shelf with the shoes. So this hat is reminding me to take a walk. It's part of my visual cue. And it comes back to tip number 2. So tip number 2 and what was the cue? The cues are tip number 4. So 2 and 4 work together. Having cues that bring you joy is really helpful. And the other thing is when it comes, like, drinking water is such a big part of our healthy bodies. We need to drink and stay hydrated. And that's part of the reason MADTASTY was created, right? It's about staying hydrated and having that CBD. So 2 things. With hydration, I have a water bottle out, and this reminds me to drink more water. If I fill this up, my goal is to finish it by the end of the day. And the same thing goes with something like MADTASTY, is if I put this on my counter or in my refrigerator, every time I see it, I'm reminded to drink water. I'm reminded to have CBD. So all of this stuff works together. And lastly, I talked about auditory cues. Music is incredibly powerful for our well-being. Emotionally, our state can change so fast when we hear things. And it's not just music, actually. It could be anything. So that's why tip number 4 is huge. Visual, auditory, and aromatherapy, or just aromas in general, those cues will help you stick to things and find more joy in things and really trigger you to get all of this stuff done. One of the best things that you can do for consistency, and this is tip number 5, is accountability. We talked about this earlier. You said that you wanted to have an accountability partner, and you said you love to socialize. So you can put the 2 in 1. You can bring joy into your life through socializing, and you can have accountability with a friend, with a family member, with a loved one. It is massively helpful because an accountability partner not only keeps you on track for staying consistent and reaching your goals, but they can also be there to support you emotionally, and they can remind you of your progress, like tracking your progress together. And this is a mutually beneficial relationship, right? Is that you hold that person accountable and they're holding you accountable. And this is also an acts of service. You told me that one of your top love language, I think, is acts of service, right? So it feels like an act of service when you can hold somebody accountable, and you're gonna feel like an act of service when they're holding you accountable. So you can actually have multiple accountability partners too. I'll do this. I have different people that I know are gonna hold me accountable for different things. So you could have one person that holds you accountable for working out, and maybe you take the same classes together. And then the same thing is true with food. I mean, I really think for you, Kenzie, and for a lot of people, I'm sure somebody listening can relate to this too. If you can make food social, that also is a form of accountability. Lastly, I would say your accountability partner doesn't have to be someone you know. You can work with a coach. A coach is a phenomenal form of accountability partner. This is part of what I do when I coach people, is simply holding them accountable. I feel like some people just pay me to make sure they get things done. Like that's like a huge part of my role as a coach. You can join a challenge. I know, Kenzie, you talked about doing like a 21-day meditation challenge or something. Is that right?
Yes.
Like joining a challenge is holding yourself accountable. So that might be like some instructor you really love or someone online you really like. There's tons of challenges that you can join for free, and just the process of doing something every single day, that's a form of accountability. Actually, that leads me to the final thing. This is like a little bonus tip for you, Kenzie, and for anybody else listening, is be kind to yourself. Practice self-compassion throughout this whole process. So many of us beat ourselves up mentally, and we can get really hard on ourselves and feel like we're not doing enough, or we're not making enough progress, we're not going fast enough. We can really be hard on ourselves at the end of the day if we didn't do everything we set out to. And I want to remind you that this is a long-term process. This isn't about like short-term results or doing something temporarily. We're trying to think of something that can be for longevity's sake. And we have to practice being kind to ourselves and stop being so negative. We are often our own worst critics. And so this needs to be a big priority. And this is actually, it all ties in together. When you practice yoga or any sort of fitness, that's a form of self-love and compassion. And if you find the right teacher, they'll build that into the practice as well. Like they'll say encouraging things to you. When you socialize with your friends, when you have that accountability, that's a form of self-love. When you eat a really great meal that's nourishing and you're shifting away from something that might be just comfort food into something that's really good for your long-term health, like that's a form of self-love. So as you're practicing each of these different things, don't forget to be compassionate. And also, everybody goes at a different pace, so do your best not to compare yourself to them, because ultimately comparing ourselves to other people gets in our way. And if we focus too much on the shoulds, it's not supporting us in a positive way. Right now, sit down and think, how can you make all these things happen? How can you set yourself up for success tomorrow? You're gonna get that momentum going. You're gonna build some great habits. You're gonna help yourself build towards a wonderful well-being routine, and you'll start to feel better really quickly if you start implementing those things.
And Whitney, we cannot thank you enough for being here with us. You have guided us through an amazing life coach lesson. So it's been awesome. And yeah, keep up with us on socials, and we will talk with everybody soon.
Thanks,
Check in a
Kenzie.
couple months.
Bye, everybody.
Of course. Bye, guys. Thank you, Whitney.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, and good luck to you, Kenzie, and to everybody else.